Formula One has had a lot of teams coming and going over the years, but only a handful had managed to stay, and most important, stay relevant. One of those teams has gone through more ups and downs than Ferrari's hope for a title in the last decade, and that's the Sauber team. Now renamed Alfa Romeo, it has a bit of an identity crisis depending on where you look. With their Twitter renamed as Alfa Romeo Racing, but their esports team called Sauber Esports and their YouTube channel still being Sauber Motorsport. We'll talk about Alfa Romeo as a name change for the purpose of this video, instead of a rebranding and a new entry. In the last 10 years they went from finishing 8th to 6th to 10th and up and down through the seasons, with promising improvements in 2018 and 2019 to be the frontrunners, the backmarkers for 2020. But let's not forget that right before that they were almost world champions. In 2007 they had the third fastest car, and for 2008 they were proper title contenders. But what happened there? And why is this chapter not talked about as an underdog who rose to the top story? Why does pretty much no one speak about BMW Sauber anymore, the same way Braun or the old Renault get attention? In today's video we're going to explain all of this, what actually happened to BMW Sauber. After an impressive debut season in 1993 with Mercedes-Benz as partners, carrying over from the sports car world where they conquered together, it looked to be like the Mercedes-Sauber duo would be a force to reckon with in the coming years. But after a few seasons of stagnant performance, Mercedes decided to part ways with Sauber and joined the McLaren program, and therefore Ford engines would start powering the Swiss outfit for a year, while they were putting together a contract in place for Ferrari power as an interim measure, looking to working with new sponsor Petronas to construct their own engines. A plan that, due to the major economic crash in Asia and Petronas being a Malaysian company, fell through. They would therefore extend their contract with Ferrari and manufacture their own gearboxes while buying every Ferrari part allowed under the regulations. For 2004, they built their own wind tunnel. They were one of the only few teams to have one. This attracted the attention of BMW, who had been powering Williams for the past few years, but due to team principal Sir Frank not budging on dividing ownership of the team and wanting to remain as just customer of their engines, and BMW wanting to put more fingers into the oily and rubbery F1 pie, made the partnership collapse, with them opting to partner Sauber in a much more in-depth fashion. By this time, the link between Sauber and their suppliers Ferrari was quite thin. This is also demonstrated by the fact that for 2005 they ran with Michelin tires, opposite to all other Ferrari teams who ran Bridgestones due to the close tie the two shared. At the end of the 2005 season, a majority stake of the Sauber team was sold to BMW, with Peter Sauber only retaining a 20%, and the team being rebranded as BMW Sauber. On January 17, 2006, the BMW F1.06 was unveiled, with one of the best looking liveries in Formula One history, and a lineup consisting of world champion Jacques Villeneuve and Nick Heidfeld. The first half of the season was over, and it was looking quite promising. The teams had already bagged a number of point finishes, and the constant turret development was showing a real appetite for victory, and on the 13th race of the season at the Hungaroring, they scored their first podium with Heidfeld, while the second car, driven by Kubica following Villeneuve's accident of the German Grand Prix the week before, managed to finish well on the points. Tensions were high with Villeneuve, and Kubica did such a good job that he got to drive for the remainder of the season, putting the champion and finishing with his Formula One career. He still has stuff to say from time to time, but let's just say that the accident he suffered at the Nürburgring may have affected his mental faculties for good. It's either that or the man only watches F1 through a glazed pair of glasses with no sound on. Anyway, the team managed to finish 5th in the championship, but crucially ahead of their closest rivals Toyota, the other recently joined manufacturer, making their way up the grid. 2007 was a better year. With a great aero package and a solid lineup of drivers, their only setback was reliability on both the power unit and gearbox. They were in a no man's land when it came to the standings, with McLaren and Ferrari way ahead but clear of the midfield. They got their maiden podium of the season at the Canadian Grand Prix, but that race wasn't remembered by a BMW podium. It was remembered by a BMW crash. One of the nastiest we've seen in recent history, where a collision with the rear of Jarno Trulli's Toyota made the pole lose control over the car, smashing hard into the wall, with only the survival cell recognizable after the crash. Surprisingly, Kubica only missed one race, and on his return, he scored on every single one he finished by one, while Heidfeld bagged another third position. They finished 2007 with 111 points, 50 clear of Renault but 65 behind McLaren. Although these were disqualified due to the Spygate scandal, so BMW were bumped up to second. For 2008 though, they built a beast, with both drivers starting in the top 5 on the first event. Kubica started from the front row, but DNF'd while Heidfeld managed to get a second place. On the next race at Malaysia, Kubica also finished second, but after climbing from 6th at the start. A pole position yielded a third place at the following race, and after a second place in Monaco, Kubica managed to conquer the circuit Gilles Villeneuve, taking his and BMW's first win alongside his teammate. It was a BMW 1-2. It was around this point though that the executives decided to lift off the throttle, to stop development of the 2008 car to focus their efforts on the 2009 regulation change. This was not a popular decision within the team. And to this day, Kubica says this was the decision that cost him the championship. A string of decent results would follow, but they were no match for Ferrari and McLaren, and apart from a late podium appearance, they would struggle to finish on the points for the latter few events of the calendar. This was it, right? All the effort and development time had been worth it, right? The first Grand Prix of the year then came. Drivers Kubica and Heidfeld were giddy. The 2009 contender was a beast, but the development time of the 2009 car surely would have stumped the previous one and made them contenders. Well, let's just say they didn't make the front row. A chaotic race meant that Heidfeld finished P10, while his teammate crashed with 3 laps to go while running on 3rd place. The second race was the iconically chaotic Malaysian Grand Prix, where torrential rain meant only 31 laps of the 56 intended were completed, and miraculously, Heidfeld managed to finish 2nd. This would be pretty much the peak of the season. You see, while many other teams had catched on to the double-decker diffuser loophole, BMW didn't, which gave them a massive handicap. After 9 appalling races with only 2-point finishes, BMW called a press conference and called it quits at the end of the season. Efforts to secure the future of the team by FOTA, an association you can learn more about by clicking on the iCard up there on the right, led to a potential buyer that ended up being a shell company. By the latter third of the season, results were picking up and points were more and more common, but it was too little too late. BMW finished their last season in F1 on 6th position with 36 points. The entry list for 2010, with the new teams coming in due to the minimum budget cap introduced, meant that the grid was full and it looked like BMW Sauber were not going to be racing that season. On November 2009, it was announced that Peter Sauber had reacquired the team and was hinging on another one dropping their efforts for the 2010 campaign to show up. Lucky for him, Toyota's sudden announcement that they were dropping their 2010 entry secured a spot on the grid for the now-again Swiss team, and although they would be running Ferrari engines, the name stuck for another season. Due to Peter not yet applying for a name change, with everything happening so suddenly, the only thing that was BMW about the team was the 3 letters on the description, because the chassis was Sauber, the color scheme was Sauber, the engine was Ferrari, and the employees were Sauber. If there's anything this story teaches us, is that when you have an opportunity, you not only have to take it, you have to embrace it, hug it, and never let go. Because more so in a sport like F1, those opportunities can be really scarce. If you look at the standings ever since, even with the new point system, they never got to the 135 point of the 2008 season. They never won a race again, and they sunk back to the far end of the grid. This had all the hallmarks of an underdog story, but ended up being a missed opportunity, a disappointment, a letdown. A story that only those of us who really know what happened can appreciate, while it could have easily been a story of how BMW became one of the strongest constructors, and who knows, maybe they would still be racing to this very day. Yeah, so this story was one I wanted to cover for quite a bit, and I don't know why I hadn't already. It was pretty fun to research. Anyways, if you like this video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, click the video on the right or on the left depending on what you want to watch, and as always, I will see you next time.